Krishna 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 Hare Krishna 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 Hare Krishna. In all likelihood, we will need one more mat for the Matajis in the back. Just tell someone to bring. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivara Hari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivara Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivara Hari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Yashodanandana Brajajanarandana Yashodanandana Brajajanarandana Jamuna Tira Vanam Sari Jamuna Tira Vanam Sari Radha Madhava Kund Bihari Radha Madhava Kund Bihari Radha Madhava Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivara Hari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivara Hari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivara Hari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Yashodanandana Brajajanarandana Yashodanandana Brajajanarandana Jamuna Tira Vanam Sari Jamuna Tira Vanam Sari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kund Bihari Radha Madhava Kund Bihari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna
Krishna Krishna Hare Hare
Hare Rama Rama Rama
Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare
Hare Rama 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 Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare Hare Vishnupada Paramahamsa Pri Vratika Stotra Satta Sri Srimad Divine Grace Srila Bhai Charanarvind Bhakti Vedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki Jai ISKCON BBT Founder Acharyas Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur ki Jai Samaveta Bhakti Vrinda ki Jai Harinam Sankirtan ki Jai Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki Jai Jai Nitai Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Bol All glories to the assembled devotees All glories to the assembled devotees Hare Krishna All glories to the assembled devotees Hare Krishna All glories to Sri Guru and to Sri Gauranga All glories to Srila Prabhupada Om Ajnanatimirandasya Vyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Jena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manopistam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Juta Parakamalam Sri Gurun Vaisnavam Scha Sri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahaganam Raghunatan Vitam Tvam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Sri Vishakam Vitam Scha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Pranamami Hare Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Narayanam namaskritya naram chaiva narottamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayam mudirayet. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is our very means of conquest, let us first offer respectful obeisances unto Narayana, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, unto Narayana Rishi, the supermost human being, and unto Mother Saraswati, the Goddess of Learning, and unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author. Nasta prayesha badreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavati tamashloke bhaktir bhavati naistiki. By regularly hearing the Srimad Bhagavatam and by rendering a service unto the pure devotee, all that is troublesome within the heart becomes destroyed practically to nil, and loving devotional service unto the Supreme Lord, who is praised with transcendental songs, becomes established as an irrevocable fact. Idam Bhagavatam Nama Puranam Brahma Samhitam Uttama Shloka Charitam Chakara Bhagavan Rishi Nishreyasaya Lokasya Dhanyam Swasthaya Namaha. This Srimad Bhagavatam, known as the Grantaraj, the king of all Vedic literatures, is the literary incarnation of God. It is compiled by the incarnation of God, Srila Vyasadeva. It is meant for the ultimate good of all people. It is all successful, all blissful, and all perfect. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Surabhyay Namaha Om Surabhyay Namaha Om Surabhyay Namaha Mukham karoti vachalam pangum langayate girim Yat kripat maham bande Sri Gurum Dinataranam Yat kripat maham bande Sri Gurum Dinataranam. Hare Krishna. Welcome to our Bhagavatam class. We seem to have a few new faces. Yeah. So, how many are coming from Pune, huh?
Yes,
Pune. All glories to Pune. Is it? I mean, to Pune devotees. Yeah. So we are continuing our a reading from the first canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Yesterday we just completed chapter number 1. So those who are just now coming and who possibly might be staying a few days, we're starting a new chapter. We'll make it easier for you, especially. Krishna's arranged nicely. So this chapter 2 is an extremely important chapter. I mean, all the chapters are important. It is from this particular chapter that our founder Acharya, His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada, felt it appropriate to actually in 2 very important places, one purport of the Bhagavatam, I forget which chapter, he cites a series of verses that we'll be covering in this chapter, and those same, I think it's 5 or 6 verses, those same 5 verses which basically summarize the whole process, the beginning to the end, within 5-6 verses. When Srila Prabhupada arrived in America, he also included these verses, and we will see as we will gradually come to them. They're at the beginning of this chapter, actually. We are, of course, here at the Sayadri Goloka Dham, and if you look all around, we're in a forest. Many forests, we're surrounded by forests. And this pastime is also taking place in a forest. The forest of Naimisharanya. So we can kind of like identify with that a little bit. And just like in the forest of Naimisharanya, a much larger, of course, number of sages gathered. Anyways, we have a good number of Pune sages who have gathered today. And some have been here for the last week or so. We will, let's see, verse number 1 has basically a shorter purport than the text. The text has 3 lines, the purport has 2. So we will go to text number 2, but let's see, we will recite text number 1, just to start the chapter nicely here. Vyasa uvacha iti samprashna sambristu vipranam romaharshanihi pratipujya vachas tesam pravaktum upachakrame Vyasa uvacha iti samprasna samhristo vipranam romaharshanihi pratipujya vachas tesam pravaktum upachakrame Vyasa uvacha iti samprashna samhristo vipranam romaharshanihi pratipujya vachastesham pravaktum upachakrame.
Vyasa uvacha iti samprashna samhristo vipranam romaharshanihi puja vachastesham pravaktam upachakrame.
Vyasa uvacha
Vyasa uvacha
iti samprashna samhrishto
iti samprashna samristo
vipranam raumaharshanai
vipranam maharshanihi
pratipujya vachastesham
pratipuja vachastesham
pravaktum upachakrame
pravaktum upachakrame. Vyasa uvacha.
Vyasa uvacha.
Vyasa said, iti, thus,
samprashna,
perfect inquiries, samristaha, perfectly satisfied, vipranam, of the sages there, Romaharshanihi, the son of Romaharshana, namely Ugrasrava, Pratipuja, after thanking them, Vachaha, words, Tesham, there, Pravaktam, to reply to them, Upachakrame, attempted. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki. Ugrasrava Sutta Goswami, the son of Maharshana, being fully satisfied by the perfect questions of the Brahmanas, thanked them and thus attempted to reply. Kindly repeat after me. Ugrasrava Sutta Goswami, the son of Romaharshana, being fully satisfied by the perfect questions of the Brahmanas, thanked them and thus attempted to reply. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The sages of Naimisaranya asked Sutta Goswami 6 questions, and so he is answering them one by one. I'll just read text number 2 and then go immediately to the translation and purport. Sutta uvacha Yam pravrajantam anupetam apeta krityam Dvaipayano viraha katara ayujhava Putreti tanmayataya taravo bhinedus tam sarvabhuta hridayam munim anantusmi. Translation and purport. Srila Sutta Goswami said, not necessary to repeat. Yeah. Let me offer my respectful obeisances unto that great sage, Shukadeva Goswami, who can enter the hearts of all. When he went away to take up the renounced order of life, sannyas, leaving home without undergoing reformation by the sacred thread or the ceremonies observed by the higher castes, his father, Vyasadeva, fearing a separation from him, cried out, "O my son, indeed, only the trees which were absorbed in the same feeling of separation echoed in response to the begrieved father." So now you can repeat. Srila Goswami said, Let me offer my respectful obeisances
Let me offer my respectful obeisances
unto that great sage,
unto that great sage,
Shukadeva Goswami,
Sukadeva Goswami,
who can enter the hearts
who can enter the hearts
of all.
of all.
When he went away
When he went away
to take up the renounced order of life,
to take up the renounced order of life,
sannyas,
sannyas,
leaving home
leaving home
without undergoing reformation
without undergoing reformation
by the sacred thread,
by the sacred thread,
or the ceremonies
all the ceremonies
observed by the higher castes,
observed by the higher castes,
his father Vyasadeva,
his father Vyasadeva,
fearing separation from him,
fearing separation from him,
cried out,
cried out,
O my son,
O my son,
indeed,
indeed,
only the trees
only the trees
which were absorbed
which were absorbed
in the same feelings of separation
in the same feelings of separation
echoed in response to the bereaved father.
to the bereaved father.
Purport. The institution of Varna and Asrama prescribes many regulative duties to be observed by its followers. Such duties enjoin that a candidate willing to study the Vedas must approach a bona fide spiritual master and request acceptance as his disciple. The sacred thread is a sign of those who are competent to study the Vedas from the Acharya, or the bona fide spiritual master. Srila Shukadeva Goswami did not undergo such purificatory ceremonies because he was a liberated soul from his birth. Generally, a man is born as an ordinary being, and by the purificatory processes, he is born for the second time. When he sees a new light and seeks a direction for spiritual progress, he approaches a spiritual master for instruction in the Vedas. The spiritual master accepts only the sincere inquirer as his disciple and gives him the sacred thread. In this way, a man becomes twice born, or a dvija. After qualifying as a dvija, one may study the Vedas. And after becoming well versed in the Vedas, one becomes a vipra. A vipra, or a qualified brahmana, thus realizes the absolute and makes further progress in spiritual life until he reaches the Vaishnava stage. The Vaishnava stage is the postgraduate status of a brahmana. A progressive brahmana must necessarily become a Vaishnava, for a Vaishnava is a self-realized, learned brahmana. Srila Shukadeva Goswami was a Vaishnava from the beginning. Therefore, there was no need for him to undergo all the processes of the Varnasrama institution. Ultimately, the aim of Varnasrama dharma is to turn a crude man into a pure devotee of the Lord, or a Vaishnava. Anyone, therefore, who becomes a Vaishnava accepted by the first class Vaishnava or Uttam Adhikari Vaishnava is already considered a Brahmana, regardless of his birth or past deeds. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu accepted this principle and recognized Srila Haridas Thakur as the Acharya of the holy name, although Thakur Haridas appeared in a Mohammedan family. In conclusion, Srila Shukadeva Goswami was born a Vaishnava, and therefore Brahmanism was included in him. He did not have to undergo any ceremonies. Any low-born person, be he a Kirata, Huna, Andhra, Pulinda, Pulkasha, Abhira, Shumbha, Yavana, Kasha, Kasa, or even lower, can be delivered to the highest transcendental position by the mercy of Vaishnavas. Srila Shukadeva Goswami was the spiritual master of Sri Suta Goswami, who therefore offers his respectful obeisances unto Srila Shukadeva Goswami before he begins his answers to the questions of the sages at Naimisharanya. I will read again the translation. Srila Suta Goswami said, "Let me offer my respectful obeisances unto that great sage, Shukadeva Goswami, who can enter the hearts of all. When he went away to take up the renounced order of life, sannyas, leaving home without undergoing reformation by the sacred thread or the ceremonies observed by the higher castes, his father, Vyasadeva, fearing a separation from him, cried out, 'O my son, indeed, only the trees which were absorbed in the same feelings of separation echoed in response to the bereaved father.'" Very important instructions are being conveyed here in this particular pastime and in the purport given by Srila Prabhupada. From the very beginning, we're in the first canto of the Bhagavatam, we see that there is reference to the long-standing system of Varna and Asrama. And traditionally, whoever was fortunate to be born in Vedic culture, one would naturally and automatically, generally it would take a few years, and there's a whole scientific process, we can say, as nicely explained by our acharyas. There's a scientific process by which one can determine the identity or character or varna of a young boy. And that was the common practice in villages where the majority of people traditionally were living. And this is very nicely explained actually by Srila Bhakti Vinod Thakur, who mentions in one of his writings that before the age of 15, he specifically mentions 15, before the age of 15, the local brahmanas in the village, they should fix up the Varna of each individual. They should determine by, actually there are specific process. There are 4 ways by which our senior most brahmanas in the village would actually identify and then officially, we could say, make known that this particular boy, he is showing characteristics of a brahmana, or a kshatriya, or a vaishya, or a shudra. And this process of identifying one's varna, nowadays it's, not being followed to a large extent. And over the centuries, as we know, and that's become a major problem in many ways, people have kind of concluded or assumed that, okay, if I'm born in this kind of family, then I should automatically be identified as either Brahmana, Kshatriya, etc. So, Srila Bhakti Vinod Thakur also mentions that if this is not done, Prabhupada also reiterates the same point. If we have a society whereby individuals do not know, do not understand who they are in terms of the whole Varna system, then society will inevitably become disorganized and gradually will develop what is called Varna Sankara, you see. So one of the 4 ways by which, and this is important for us to know, because at some particular point, as explained in many different places, Srimad Bhagavatam by Srila Prabhupada, we need to identify and understand the different positions of individuals within society. So one of the criterias, or one of the ways by which we can identify the Varna of an individual is by knowing one's family tradition, whose parents, whose grandparents, and as far as possible, actually in the Vedic culture, one would be, especially for the higher levels, let's say the Dvijas, there would be records kept by the priests, actually, in temples. I think in some temples they still have that, where one would know about one's gotra and so many details. They would be keeping history. So by understanding one's lineage, family lineage, it is one way, not the only way, but one of the ways that can give indication as to the nature or the Varna of an individual. The second way by which to identify a person's Varna is simply by observing, by observation, just by, because in a village, of course nowadays many of us, less people experience life in a village, but in a village, everyone knows everyone. And everyone knows what everyone is doing also. I mean, yeah. Even the neighboring villages know. So it means that actually, as children would grow up, the elders in the village especially, and the elderly brahmanas, they would, by the time somebody reaches the age of 10 or 15, they will have been observing that that boy for the last 10 years, right? So they will know him in and out, practically speaking. And so it becomes very easy for them. And that's one major advantage of having or following this principle of being localized. When you're localized, like in the village, you grow up with the whole village is your family, and everyone knows you. And if people are Krishna conscious, they will be supporting one another in so many different ways. Yeah, and of course that is the most important duty and responsibility for brahmanas in a village, to fix up the Varna. So second is simply by observation. The third way by which one can understand one's Varna, and that was followed and it is still in various places, is by doing one's horoscope, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, that is a valid science, Jyotish Shastra, and when there are qualified people, I mean, we see in looking at the appearance of Krishna, the appearance of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, all great personalities, even ordinary people, their chart would be made. And so that's another way to understand about the nature, the quality of an individual. And the fourth one that Srila Prabhupada mentions in the less known small book that is called Gita Nagari. How many have read Gita Nagari? How many know about Gita Nagari? you know about it? Yeah. How many have read Gita Nagari?
In one of your book it is mentioned.
How many have read Gita Nagari? Okay, yeah. You read? Congratulations. Yeah. It's in the folio, it's available, but it's less accessible because it's not yet been published, although we've been in contact actually with the BBT here in India. And I'm happy to report that actually Bhima Prabhu, who is one of the main, if not the main person overseeing the publishing of Srila Prabhupada's books, when I wrote to him a few months back, was responded very positively and favorably, so that book should be out. So there it mentions that by psychological tests, by administrating either in writing or speaking verbally, it can be done. Nowadays, I mean, especially in the Western countries, don't even know the word Varna or Ashram. Of course, surprisingly, if you happen to listen to conversations of people in the West, there are more and more Sanskrit words that are becoming part of the English vocabulary. Karma and Yuga and Kali Yuga. I think since the last 10 months, probably more people are speaking about Kali Yuga, where things have become more degraded and whatnot. So the point being made here actually that a personality like Shukadeva Goswami, of course his father is not an ordinary personality, Srila Vyasadeva. So he did not undergo any kind of samskara or ceremony because he was, this is explained later on also, even within the womb, he was a self-realized soul. So part of this system of Varna and Asrama are specifically these different samskaras that are meant to be followed, and mostly that is for householders. Because the first of the samskaras is the Garbhadhana samskara. If we want to have in as near future as possible qualified individuals who will actually be very quickly be able to become Vaishnavas. This is nicely explained here. You know, one begins by being Dvija, by receiving, before studying the Vedas. One should become Dvija, one should receive sacred thread. You need to have sacred thread to begin your study. Once you study and understand, and you become Vipra, learned. And once you become learned, at some point you actually can become Brahmana, qualified Brahmana. But that's not the end of it, as Prabhupada explains. Then beyond Brahmana is Vaishnava, because actually the majority of Brahmanas will not know or understand or accept one of the verses in the Bhagavatam, well known by everyone, Krishna Su Bhagavan Swayam, that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In other words, most people, especially in India, but that phenomena is also there around the world nowadays, where there's more of the Vedic culture being introduced. But most people, most brahmanas, they are impersonalists, you know. So coming back to the point of samskara, it was Srila Prabhupada's desire and expectation, and we could say request, especially to his grihastha devotees, householders, that that they understand the importance of following these different rituals, so that more qualified, enlightened souls can be attracted and actually be born in the family of actual Vaishnavas. Yeah. Again, Vaishnava is not just rubber stamping somebody as Vaishnava by wearing tilak or whatever. Vaishnava means one who understands the essence of Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, and one who, especially, this will be very nicely delineated in the 7th chapter, I meant 7th canto. 7th canto, the last 5 chapters, beginning with chapter 11 to 15, Srila Narada Muni will give in detail all kinds of very essential information, largely for householders actually. But he speaks about all of the varnas and asramas as well. And in one of the well-known verses, he gives a list of 50 qualities that are needed for one to actually Prabhupada in maybe 2 verses, if not that purport, but a purport soon after that, explains that it is only by developing these 30 qualities that we can begin to establish Varnasrama. And the first of those 30 qualities are known to every single devotee who comes to the point of taking diksha. Because before taking initiation, this is mentioned here also, the need to eventually approach and accept a bona fide spiritual master. So the first are these 4 principles, or 4, let's say, qualities, the counterpart of which are 4 rules and regulations. So the 4 qualities to follow are satyam, daya, tapa, sucham, which correspond to our 4 rules and regulations. Satyam, truthfulness, therefore avoid gambling. Daya, compassion, therefore no meat-eating, no killing of animals, directly or indirectly. Satyam dava. Then daya, tapa rather. Tapa means restraining or controlling our senses. And the most difficult, of course, is sex life, therefore no illicit sex life. And of course, the 4th one is socham, being clean both mentally as well as in terms of the body, therefore no intoxication. So everything we have been taught by Srila Prabhupada and what is being given by our acharyas, it's all coming, of course, from these transcendental literatures, and it is completely, logical and scientific. Anyone who actually begins to apply this process will begin to get the various results which are being described here. So, because very often devotees will ask, well, why is it that it seems to take such a long time to make advancement in spiritual life, or why is it some people don't seem to make any advancement? And of course, generally, the reason is it will depend on each individual's application of the instructions that are being received in the Shastra. So there are many things, of course, to be said, because the whole topic of Varna and Asrama is a huge topic, and anyone who's been within our ISKCON society long enough will also come to know that it happens to be 50% of Prabhupada's mission yet to be realized, yet to be fulfilled. Unfortunately, to this day, there are many misconceptions about Varnasrama as well. And although Prabhupada here mentions that for personalities like Shukadeva Goswami, it's okay not to follow Varnasrama. I'm sure many people like to read these kind of quotes and might use them as well. You see, it's written in black and white right here on page 21 or whatever page this is. Yeah. So it's like Prabhupada will also, he makes reference to Srila Haridas Thakur. So Srila Haridas Thakur also, we could say, was above Varnasrama because he didn't have time for Varnasrama. He was chanting 22 hours a day. We can easily understand that these are very rare and exceptional personalities. So if one is able to do that, okay, forget about Varnasrama. Just go on chanting and remain awake, while you're chanting. So it means that actually the system of Varna and Asrama, for the vast majority of people, is meant to be followed. And one of the main reasons, of course, is that as we hear from the Bhagavad Gita, it's given by Krishna, it's created by Krishna. And Krishna doesn't give anything or doesn't create anything unless there's a purpose behind it. And whatever he creates or gives must be of value, isn't it? I mean, yes. So initially this may not be obvious to many. It does take, it's just like to understand about spiritual life, to understand about the inner dimensions, we could say, of self-realization. It's I mean, people spend not only years but lifetimes. We've been around for many lifetimes, all of us, and it's most likely as well we've been around not only in lower forms of life but as human beings as well, because the subject matter is a very deep and profound subject matter, and one of the important understandings we need to have, which often is absent, is that system or arrangement of Varna and Asrama, and this is stated by Srila Prabhupada on many occasions, and other acharyas as well, is meant to help us reach the primary goal and purpose of life, which is to actually become self-realized. So here it's clearly mentioned how, Shukadeva Goswami was already self-realized. I mean, I'm sure you've all heard how he was in the womb of his mother for 16 years, somewhat unusual and unheard of. He must have a record, what is it? The Guinness World Record, 16 years. Lord Chaitanya was in the womb for how many years? I think 14 months.
14 months.
Yeah. I mean, for those who may not know or who may not remember, normally it's like 9 months. But there are premature babies also, which sometimes can be very dangerous, if not fatal. And generally also, if there's late deliveries, that becomes somewhat of a concern to the doctor and to the mother as well. Anyways, inasmuch as Shukadeva Goswami was transcendental, I'm sure his mother must have also been transcendental. 16 years. What's happening? So, I mean, that's a long time when, 5,000 years ago when these pastimes took place, where at that time the culture was very, very different than what it is today. So this is the beginning of this chapter where Sutta Goswami will begin to address the residents at Naimisharanya. Whoops, yeah. So, just looking at the time here. Oh, God. If there's any comment or question, we'll have to keep it short because somehow we went over time a little bit. Any thoughts, comments? Yes.
Why there are many ways the Varna should be found out? Why not one way or?
Well, there's only 4.
It's like just by horoscope or something we determine that's.
Oh, why
different ways? Multiple ways.
Because these four ways that have been identified, let's say, and that are traditionally followed by our acharyas, they give more support or more clarity or more assurance, we could say, that indeed, looking at all these different angles, that individual in all likelihood is like that. It's very interesting how when Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur speaks about this, he mentions that we may, the local brahmanas in the village, they may change. Actually, he says a few interesting things. The first he mentions is that generally we will go by one's birth. Generally. But then there's a 2-year period. He gives like a 2-year period to kind of observe if that person indeed is acting as a brahmana or the kshatriya or vaishya. And sometimes he mentions directly as well, an individual may be promoted. He may also be demoted. So Prabhupada explained this on many occasions, that, and that's in the Bhagavad Gita also, in that verse, Chaturvarna Mayasisam Guna Karma, based on quality, a visible quality, and based on one's ability to perform activities in relation to one's Varna. Yeah. So, actually, when Vedic culture is functioning properly, in most cases, people who are born in the Brahmana family do become Brahmana. You see. But now we are in Kali Yuga, where everything is extremely confused, and where the vast majority of people have no connection with the Vedic culture, isn't it? The Prabhupada makes reference to this as well. So Sanatana Dharma is for everyone, and even if somebody who's coming from completely disconnected with the Vedic culture, by one's great fortune to come in contact with an authorized and qualified personality, means a Vaishnava, he can also, by taking up the process, become a Vaishnava. Yeah. So in Kali Yuga, everything is more complicated. Welcome to Kali Yuga. And so therefore, part of our one major responsibility we all have, given to us by Srila Prabhupada, is to change the world to it's a very nice term that Prabhupada uses. One of the objectives of the Krishna consciousness movement is to bring a complete overhaul in society, and Prabhupada specifically mentioned to revert to the 4 Varnas and Ashramas. Specifically he mentions. So this is part of what all of us individually and as a society, this is like our mission. This is Krishna's mission. Dharma samstapanarthaya sambhavami yuge yuge, to re-establish the principles of Dharma. And these principles of Dharma are on the spiritual as well as the material level. Although when we factually understand the spiritual dimension, as Prabhupada would explain, for a self-realized person, nothing is material. For a self-realized person. Right. So that's why when we speak about Daiva Varnasrama, Prabhupada translates very nicely as that divine culture. These material activities that we perform, but when connected or dovetail in Krishna's service, they no longer remain material activities. Otherwise, Varnasrama, as also explained by our acharyas, is known as asuric. asuric Varnasrama. Yeah. They're basically only, it's like in Bhagavad Gita, it speaks about the divine and the demoniac. You're either on this side or this side. Most of us are on this side, because unless one becomes self-realized, one is demoniac. Don't mind, I mean, we're all demoniac. In that, I mean, one lecture Prabhupada explains this very, we could say in a very astounding manner, by mentioning that everyone in the material world, what does he use? He uses the word, everyone in the material world, the ones who feel offended, is a criminal. Me, a criminal. And then Prabhupada in that lecture starts to mention different personalities. He says, even Lord Brahma. Because he's come in the material world. Of course, it's like, we were all rascals before coming to Krishna consciousness. And to the extent that we follow or not follow, we remain rascals. Anyone who has yet attained the level of, Paramahamsa, which is a very lofty status, is, so we have these different levels of impurities. So we are endeavoring to practice Deva Varnasrama, which is actually that pure activity of devotional service within the Varnas and Asramas. But only in extremely rare instances, like we find here, in the case of Shukadeva Goswami, will one just walk away from, he walked away, he just left home immediately. But for 99.9.9 ad infinitum, that's not the case. So therefore, and I'll just close on this point. This is another statement by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, that he says that the system of Varna and Asrama is there actually for the Vaishnavas in their conditioned state. Make a note of that. Make either a written or a mental note. That Varnasrama is that ideal system for the Vaishnavas in their conditioned state. And even those who are above, who are not conditioned, they will respect and work within Varnasrama, although they are not bound by Varnasrama. And although Bhakti, pure Bhakti, is above Varnasrama, but when we perform those activities of Varna and Asrama in pure Bhakti, it's pure Bhakti. That's another statement he makes, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, that all the activities performed within the Varnas and Asrama, when done for the pleasure and satisfaction of Krishna, do not incur karmic reaction. What doesn't incur karmic reaction? It's only bhakti, isn't it? Akarma. There is karma, there is vikarma, and then there is akarma. So akarma is possible only when we perform our activities for the pleasure and satisfaction of Krishna. And that should be generally performed within the Varnasrama system. We'll get an opportunity to discuss more about that, and one of the important aspects of Varnasrama, of course, and Prabhupada explains as well, the whole Vedic culture is all about training. It's all about training and education. So here we are sitting in the Vidya pit. And Gurukul is that ideal institution that gives one the opportunity from an early age to receive that knowledge, to receive that education, to receive that training. And most of us have not. Anyone here been to Gurukul? I'm asking people from India here. So I'm saying, just like if people from India nowadays, the vast majority of people from India have not been to Gurukul, what to speak of outside of India. Yeah. So that was Srila Prabhupada's desire, one of his many desires, to help reintroduce, Vedic way of life, Vedic culture. That Gurukul is like essential and urgently needed as well. If there happens to be any additional question, we can take tomorrow possibly, because it's the sun has set. Jai Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki Jai, Srila Prabhupada ki Gaura Pimanandi.